Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill is an interesting book which was said to be originally written by him in 1938, yet was thought of as being too controversial to be published around that time and was released in 2011. The book is written as an interview between Hill and the devil. He attempts to uncover the greatest self-imposed limitation on the journey to realizing a vision, which through his dialogue was uncovered as drifting. It states the following about drifting. I cause people to drift into inharmonious and unpleasant environments in the home, in their places of occupation, in their relationships with relatives and acquaintances, and to remain there until I claim them through the habit of drifting. I can best define the word drift by saying that people who think for themselves never drift, while those who do little or no thinking for themselves are drifters. A drifter is one who permits themselves to be influenced and controlled by circumstances outside of their own mind. They would rather let me occupy their mind and do their thinking than to go to the trouble of thinking for themselves. I break down independent thought and start people on the habit of drifting by confusing their minds with unprovable ideas concerning a world of which they know nothing. I cannot exist in the minds of those who think accurately. So when I look back at my life, I would say this is true. Whenever I allowed my mind to wander onto thoughts that were not in harmony with my vision, whatever they may be at that moment, and more specifically, upon identifying with those thoughts, I would appear to drift, as he says, into unpleasant environments at home, places of occupation, and in relationships with relatives and acquaintances. So now we discuss the 7-Day Mental Diet by Emmett Fox. It's not the thoughts that show up in mind, but the ones that we choose to identify with that could cause life to appear as it does, which in certain situations we can call drifting. If you haven't seen my discussion on it, I'll link in the description to it. So a thought identified with, if persisted upon, can become a belief. And a belief can be lightly held or held up to a dogmatic conviction and varying degrees in between. Usually we find beliefs that have been reinforced by reactivity are held to deeper degrees of conviction than beliefs not persisted upon. It is important to acknowledge as well that certain traumatic situations in a person's life, although occurring once, can form deeply held beliefs. Now, regardless of the degree of conviction of the belief, they can all be released by keeping the following points into consideration. Firstly, one believes in the possibility that it can change, even to a slight degree. Number 2, depending on the degree of conviction the belief is held, adequate repetition of self-suggestion or self-suggestion of the same intention from different perspectives releases identification to the belief. Number 3, releasing identification to beliefs can be accelerated if one learns how to communicate with themselves in a way that does not reactivate the defense mechanisms of the belief, rather slip the suggestions into the subconscious through impressive communication. And by this I mean not sounding impressive on a surface level, but rather communicating in a way that slips past the defenses of the belief, entering into the subconscious by which the belief is released and then they're free from it, which is what I'd like to focus on today. And also a notable mention, I found an increase in effectiveness in belief change when modalities are applied in a state akin to sleep, theta brainwave. Yet it can still be done in an alert state if one can overcome rebuttals of the belief if challenged. I also find that there's less arguments from the beliefs while in an alpha brainwave state than in beta brainwave state. Now, drifting, as was defined in Outwitting the Devil, is a result of beliefs. We can call them beliefs of temptation, usually unnecessary fear-based beliefs, which we'll talk about later. If the beliefs are not identified with, a person won't drift, because it was operating through those beliefs that resulted in drifting. So it's one thing to forcefully tell yourself to stop drifting, and it is another thing to bring awareness to the beliefs that appear as a person drifting and release identification to them. And so to make belief change easier in general, which it actually is, we can release identification to meta-beliefs and certain supporting beliefs if applicable. Meta and supporting beliefs to drifting beliefs, such as beliefs can change, hard to change, difficult to change, which is not true unless one believes themselves to be true, which can be changed. We can start by suggesting to ourselves that there is no real need for approval or validation from this world to be how we truly desire to be. This world acts as a reflection of past beliefs playing out, some helpful and some not so much. It is merely a reflection. This releases identification to beliefs that suggest something outside can cause you to drift, thus reducing the drifting. Now, what if mental chatter says there is truth found outside more so than I know inside in relation to my vision? Understand that it is only you who persuades yourself in relation to information that appears, that determines what is accepted as true or not. This also reduces drifting. And since you are the only suggester in relation to information, you have the ability to distinguish what is true and what is not. This also releases identification to beliefs that suggest something outside knows more about you than you know about yourself to reduce drifting. This also releases identification to beliefs that suggest truth can't or is hard or difficult to be found within, thus reducing drifting in this regard as well. And now take a moment and acknowledge that you are now more aware to a higher degree and increasingly more so each day of what meaning of truth is being applied to information. Now, as you accept what is found within, that which you know is true, like that's the way it is, this world will play it out. That is what it does. And you'll realize that there is only one cause, and it is within. And you'll see this playing out more so. And as you do, you'll find you're not unnecessarily searching for truth outside and thus reducing drifting. I like how James Allen said it in The Heavenly Life. Said a great teacher to his disciples, "Those who shall be a lamp unto themselves, relying upon themselves only, and not relying upon any external help, but holding fast to the truth as their lamp, and seeking their salvation in the truth alone, shall not look for assistance to any besides themselves. It is they amongst my disciples who shall reach the very topmost height." So this world is an emanation from within. Thus, everything that appears outside was first sourced within. So now consider that this adversary in the book is not actually trying to cause you to drift, for there is only one cause, and this cause is higher than the beliefs, as he also said. I cannot exist in the minds of those who think accurately. For example, any thought that shows up in your mind that you would not consider to be ideal, let it pass. Don't let it encourage a past belief not true, nor form a new one that is not ideal by simply not identifying with it. To remain in your ideal state of consciousness, from which all that is ideal to you is automatically added onto you anyways, the path of the non-drifter. So as mentioned earlier, I found my drifting was related to fear-based beliefs. And I also found from working with others, fear-based beliefs seem to be the root of many of these thoughts, which if identified with, results in a person appearing to drift. If these beliefs are no longer identified with, so much of the thoughts that lead to drifting, which are related to that belief, no longer show up in mind. So it is specific beliefs that appear as a person drifting. Remember, the true self could never cause the drifting. It is beyond drifting. It is only beliefs identified with in mind, which are not accurate to the vision, that can appear as a person drifting. As he said, I cannot exist in the minds of those who think accurately. And so all that is true and in contribution to your vision is accurate thinking. Now, accurate thinking, as he defined, is the ability to distinguish facts from information, or as we used to say before, signal versus noise, and then to further sort the facts as relevant and irrelevant to your vision. Now, if you have a vision or a definite chief aim in life, this is easy. You simply entertain the facts that relate to your vision and let the other ones be, and then you can't drift. And if circumstances seem to appear to cause you to drift, remember that the cause is within, and more specifically, what the cause is identified with, which appears as drifting circumstances. So we release identification to the corresponding belief, and the drifting in regards ceases. And then you'll see with your own eyes all those circumstances that we could call manifestations of drifting-based beliefs fall aside, as James Allen once said in As a Man Thinketh. Very soon, so altered has their mind become that the workshop can no longer hold them. It has become so out of harmony with their mentality that it falls out of their life as a garment is cast aside. And you don't even need to cast the garment aside. It's done for you by the unseen. So in the book, he also refers to fear-based beliefs, and it is some of these fear-based beliefs that result in drifting. Now, if we flip over to Think and Grow Rich, he breaks down fear into 6 categories: fear of poverty, fear of criticism, fear of ill health, fear of loss of love of someone, fear of old age, and fear of death. These fears, if not made peace with, may show up in appearances as a person drifting. For our discussion today, we'll consider fear of criticism. Now, these unnecessary fear-based beliefs perpetuate an identity, one that is not helpful to a person who desires to be how they truly desire to be. You see, we form an identity or self-image in life, which can be helpful. And this identity, which is formed through experiences in our lives, and more specifically, how we imagine ourselves to be in relation to these experiences, is what we associate I am to. The I is formless, and we give form by what we associate to it, as we discussed in our conversation on Sunday, which I'll link to in the description. I is awareness of being. I is the true self, the fact that you exist beyond body, and what you believe yourself to be, and what you believe about the world, which includes how you believe reality to work, which is a meta-belief. So we have beliefs about ourselves and beliefs about the world, which include people, environment, circumstances, and information. And we also have beliefs of how we believe reality to work. For example, if a person believes that they are the effect of this or that, that is how they go about experiencing their life. If they release that belief in relation to, for example, fear of criticism, the experience will change. They'll notice people treating them differently. That's because they no longer identify with a belief that could play out in a way that people treat them that way. So let's run through an example. I really like the Robert Dill's language patterns. They're easy and fast belief change patterns, and as you apply them, they become easier for 2 reasons. Number 1, like with any modality, as you apply it and prove it in an equation, you'll find that it gets easier and easier. Number 2, the benefit in learning how to do this for yourself is you'll find that you could do this anywhere you are with yourself. I encourage this, that way you don't become overly dependent on the external, which can result in drifting. You have everything you already need inside already now that is ideal. So listen to yourself and trust yourself as you know the way. So let's say one appears to drift. They consume some information on the internet, and as a result, they now fear criticism to have a conversation on a topic they really desire to. They know, however, this is only an illusion, a belief identified with in mind. If they don't identify with it, they automatically talk about what they want, and people will reciprocate accordingly as others reflect their state. For this, we can use the redefined language pattern. This is the act of using similar words of how the belief would communicate in a sentence, yet not conflict with the belief. That way the belief's defense mechanism is not provoked. Then with subtle distinctions, speak to the subconscious to release identification to the belief in question. Now, the way I like to do this is in conversation with myself, which allows me to release meta-beliefs, supporting beliefs, and the belief in question without any resistance, which is my variation of this and works really well for me and others that I've worked with. It is simply a number of these stacked together and strung together to facilitate transformation. I have an example of applying something similar to this in a recent discussion that we've done. I'll put a link in the description to that video. So when it comes to fear of criticism, a simple redefine can be, I'm not sure if it's truly a fear of criticism, perhaps more of an inspiration to live courageously. Or we could say, we also see how beyond fear of criticism is actually the joy of accomplishment. So as we go through this example, keep into consideration that your choice of words is important. What speaks to one person's subconscious might not speak in that way to another person's subconscious, which is why when you hear autosuggestions that someone might use, they may be helpful for you, but another person might experience resistance to those autosuggestions. Here what's being encouraged is practicing thinking for yourself, listening to yourself, and trusting yourself, and communicating to yourself in a way where you understand what you're saying. That way you build a relationship with your subconscious, and you'll find it easier to apply these patterns. So with Redefine, we're essentially saying things are not this way, but another way, without directly saying it, which if a person directly says it to themselves, they may be met by rebuttals from the beliefs, which are defense mechanisms of the beliefs, which if we practice this and learn how to communicate to ourselves where that defense mechanism is not provoked, then with subtle distinctions with words, voice tonality, etc., we'll be able to easily speak to the subconscious to release identification to the belief in question. Which is why for some I find it's helpful for them to play light meditative music during their autosuggestions, because what that does is it puts the analytical part of the mind at ease so the intentional message can be accepted as true in the subconscious. And you'll know when you've done this right when there's a change in your feeling. You feel like something has changed. Because even if it's to a subtle degree, the change has been initiated. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's go ahead and conclude this with an autosuggestion to further encourage. You can say, I am aware, and I am aware of what I am imagining in relation to all that appears. And from this awareness, I choose to imagine and accept as true how I'd like it to be, allowing the unseen power, which is beyond appearances, to rearrange the appearances as far as my senses perceive to reflect how I imagine it to be. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk with you soon. Take care.